When you think about poetry, you probably imagine it as this high art form, something reserved for quiet moments and deep thoughts. But what if I told you that in late imperial China, during the Ming and Qing dynasties, poetry just completely transformed? It basically exploded out of the elite circles and became a crucial part of everyday life for a huge number of people.
I mean, it wasn't just art. It became this practical, incredibly powerful tool. People used it to get through, well, everything. They used it to make sense of war, to connect with friends, to work through grief, and even just to write down the simple little details of their day. It was, and this is the key, a technology for living.
And the scale of this is, well, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. We have over 1 million poems from this era that have survived to this day. 1 million! To give you some perspective, that's more than 5 times the number of poems we have from the famous Song Dynasty. So yeah, this was not a niche hobby. This was a massive cultural wave.
But here's what's really revolutionary about this period. Who was writing? For the very first time in Chinese history, women started writing and publishing poetry on this massive, unprecedented scale. We know of over 3,000 poetry collections written by women. Their voices, which had been mostly silent in the historical record, were now being written into history by their own hands. Incredible.
So, with so many people writing, a really passionate debate kicked off about the very soul of poetry. What's it even for? And what's the right way to write it? And look, this wasn't just some dry academic argument. It was a real clash between two totally different ways of looking at the world.
Okay, so you had two main camps. On one side, you had the archaists. Led by guys like Li Mengyang, they were convinced that to write great poetry, you had to copy the masters of the past, specifically from the Hai Tang dynasty, which everyone saw as the Golden Age. They were all about grand visions and powerful, formal language. But on the other side, you had the individualists. Their big champion, Yuan Hongdao, basically said, forget that. He argued that poetry should come from inside you. It should express your own true feelings, your natural sensibility, using simple, everyday language.
This line from Li Mengyang is a perfect example of the archaist style. It's epic, right? It's set out on the frontier, talking about historical battles. The heavenly wolf here is actually a star, a symbol for invaders. The voice isn't personal or intimate at all. It's big, it's historical, and it's trying to capture that timeless power of the ancient poets.
Now listen to the complete contrast with Yuan Hongdao. This line feels so immediate, so personal. You can just picture him, can't you? A carefree guy enjoying some simple music and wine. He's not writing about epic generals. He's writing about his own experience, his mood, right in that moment. That shift from the epic to the personal, that's a huge part of this story.
But this explosion of poetry wasn't just happening during times of peace and philosophical debate. When the Ming dynasty fell to the Manchu conquest in the middle of the 17th century, poetry became something else entirely. It became a vital tool for witnessing and, frankly, surviving trauma.
Listen to this line from the poet Wang Duanshu. It paints such a clear picture of her life before everything fell apart, doesn't it? It's a memory of peace, of luxury, and beauty. This is the before picture, and it makes what comes next so much more powerful.
Because that world was completely shattered. The Manchu invasion and the collapse of the Ming dynasty unleashed incredible violence. Bandits, rogue soldiers, just total chaos. Countless people, including Wang Duanshu, were forced to become refugees in their own country.
And her poetry recorded the brutal, physical reality of that experience. The same elegant woman who lived among groves of brocade flowers is now marching with soldiers. Her shoes are torn, her skin is cracked. For her, the poetic form, with its structure and its rhythm, became a way to contain all that suffering. It was a way to create a little bit of order in the middle of absolute chaos.
Beyond capturing single traumatic events, poetry also became the main way people chronicled their entire lives. For so many literate men and women, their collected poems were their autobiography, a way to build and save their own personal history, one poem at a time.
The life of a poet named Gon Leroux is the perfect example. She actually organized her life's work into 4 distinct chapters, each named for a different phase of her life. She had drafts after embroidering for her youth, drafts after cooking for her married life, drafts by the one who has not died for her long widowhood, and finally, drafts by one who lives in retirement. It's her entire life story told through verse.
And through her poems, we get to experience these huge turning points right there with her. She wrote this on her own wedding day. You can feel that mix of excitement and sadness, right? She perfectly captures that feeling that one part of her life is over and a totally new, unknown chapter is beginning. Poetry was how she processed these profound changes.
After her husband died tragically young, her poetry became this space for her grief. In this line, you can just feel the depth of her loss, that deep ache for a past she could only get back in her dreams. Her poetry collection doesn't just list events, it preserves the emotional truth of her life.
So we've seen poetry used in intellectual debates, as a witness to war, and as an autobiography. But maybe the most important thing is that it was simply woven into the fabric of daily life. For anyone with an education, it was a fundamental cultural practice.
People wrote poems about, well, everything. Seriously. They wrote poems to remember their travels, to chat with friends, to think about their spiritual beliefs, or, just to capture a beautiful sunset. It was like a social network, a diary, and a way to be mindful of the world, all rolled into one.
So when you look at it all, you realize that during this period in China, poetry wasn't a luxury. It was essential. It was this flexible, powerful, and deeply human tool that people used to record, understand, and navigate the entire spectrum of life. It was so much more than literature. It was a technology for living.